you seen female athletes? They know what they're doing. So I'm not sure what's going on or why this is an issue. The same for me.
The level of commitment to idiocy is actually remarkable. Let me help you here, Whoopi.
How does anyone watch an episode of The View other than seeing it as a satire comedy? Whoopi Goldberg is at it again, and this time around, she has been trending for her ridiculous opinions about trans athletes.
Trans athletes competing in girls' and women's sports was deeply unfair.
Men are men and women are women. Those are biological facts that cannot be changed. It's not about questioning anyone's identity, but about fairness in sports and other areas where physical differences matter. Men are naturally stronger and have more endurance, and allowing them to compete against women isn't about inclusion. It's about ignoring biology.
When you come in and you say, oh, these are men, competing against women, you're assuming that the women are weak and just can't do anything except be here.
Whoopi says God doesn't make mistakes, and then twists that statement in an attempt to defend an ideology that is predicated on not just the possibility, but the absolute certainty that God makes mistakes with regard to gender.
When people say, oh, I don't know how I feel about you. You do. God doesn't make mistakes.
No.
And the challenge is not to the trans people, it's to the people who are not trans. That's what God is looking to see, how you treat people.
Female to male, and is competing with other males.
Correct.
No. Yes. Her friend.
At this point, we will all agree that Dylan Mulvaney is a full-time attention-seeking drag queen who is a male. If Dylan quit getting attention, Dylan would quit this act and move on to the next way to get attention. This is definitely not who you want as your spokesperson if you are advocating for a transgender community. He's made millions off this little charade and has been propped up and funded by multiple institutions, corporations, media, and even the last administration.
What is it like to go into a competition against a transgender athlete when you know the outcome ahead of time?
Yeah, it's extremely deflating. I've experienced it 5 times, and each time I lost to a biological male. And the fact that that's still happening, that women are still losing to biological males in their own sport, shows why we need more female athletes to speak up about this.
The women of The View need to be educated. If they would look at the stats, it is evident that women are not as strong as men. There will be a one-off where a woman will win over a man, but that would be one of the exceptions. With this situation, younger females would not want to play sports anymore. That is what this rhetoric is doing to our little girls. It will be way better if the trans movement creates their own trans sports league. Whoopi started the episode by making a reference to California Governor Gavin Newsom, who might run for president in 2028. Gavin had previously kicked off his new podcast with a surprising take by speaking against letting transgender women and girls compete in female sports.
Last week, California Governor Gavin Newsom said that he thinks that trans athletes competing in girls' and women's sports was deeply unfair. Now, I want to hear what you think.
Newsom made this statement while talking to Charlie Kirk, a well-known conservative activist. Kirk, who funded Turning Point USA, has been a big supporter of Donald Trump and strongly opposes transgender participation in women's sports, just like Trump does.
It's like you right now should come out and be like, you know what? The young man who's about to win the state championship in the long jump in female sports,
right.
that shouldn't happen. You as the governor should step out and say no.
No, and I appreciate.
But like, would you do something like that? Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that.
This comes as Democrats try to figure out what went wrong in the 2024 election, which saw Trump return in the White House and Republicans take control of both the House and Senate. Since November, there's been a lot of debate within the party about whether cultural issues rather than economic policies played a bigger role in their losses.
There's also a humility and a grace, that these poor people are more likely to commit suicide, have anxiety and depression. And the way that people talk down to vulnerable communities is an issue that I have a hard time with as well. So both things I can hold in my hand. How can we address this issue with the kind of decency?
The ignorance displayed by this woman is stunning. Acknowledging biology isn't hate. it's reality. Women's sports exist for a reason. Denying that reason is an attack on fairness. Strength isn't the issue, fair competition is. Whoopi really thinks basic biology is a debate. No one's saying women are weak. We're saying men have an unfair advantage compared to women in sports.
It's not true. Take the U.S. women's national soccer team, for example. And if that wasn't enough, watch Whoopi Goldberg blaspheme the Lord.
God doesn't make mistakes.
No.
And the challenge is not to the trans people, it's to the people who are not trans. That's what God is looking to see, how you treat people.
Yeah.
That's
I feel like this goes without saying, but God does not pick and choose who he will judge on Judgment Day.
Science isn't hate, and pretending otherwise doesn't change reality. Funny how the same people screaming, "Trust the science," suddenly forget it exists. You either have to be bought and paid for, or really stupid to believe and state something like this. It does, however, give you a chance to have a TV show. The hosts of The View are so wildly disconnected from the views of a vast majority of Americans, and it shows.
Although Whoopi did get one thing right. God does not make mistakes. Therefore, he does not put people in the wrong body.
Most people don't agree with letting biological males compete in girls' sports, but Democrat politicians still support it, which many find strange and pretty bizarre. This show is the opposite of evolution. You can almost see it regress live on air. The hosts of The View are there to spread propaganda, not to be connected to reality. The word salads are meant to confuse their audience, which if you really think about it, cannot be that intelligent.
If the Democrats are the party of fairness and equality for women, and are the standard bearers and flag wavers of women's rights, why is it that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris continue to support trans athletes competing in women's sport, which everybody knows is a grotesque attack on women's rights to fairness and equality?
Reality is not a concept these people can understand. It is difficult to support a proven lie. Whoopi needs to retake 8th grade biology, ability to build muscle, bone density, speed, and strength, as all of these don't seem to matter to her somehow. Is it written in Whoopi's job description to sound as ridiculous as possible by offering flaccid nonsense to any and all subjects which may arise?
Pierce, again, the same concept applies. The number of people that are A, worried about that in this election, and B, that actually impacts. Again, if you are worried about trans athletes, how are you not talking about the issue of women's bodily autonomy, of their reproductive freedom, of Republicans' threats to block women from traveling between states in this country?
Let's go deeper on the athletic issue. If men are better in athletics, they're better at talk shows too, since they make it seem like a sport of who can say the most bullshit. Let's get a few transgenders on The View to replace the woman. Even Dylan looked awkward while she was rambling on. Nobody is this outrageous. It's all an act. Watching a person trying to put a square peg in a round hole never looks good. She can't see how it is an issue. Women are being severely injured. How is this not an issue?
These faggots should get their own faggot category, because before, if a man hit a woman, it used to land him in jail. Now, it gets you a gold medal at the Olympics.
Whoopi is asking a man who thinks he is a woman for guidance on men in women's sports. Why? Is she so weak-minded? Clearly, yes, because she scolds people who fight for fairness/safety in women's sports for assuming women in sports are weak. Let's explain in simple terms. The NYC Marathon has been run 55 times. Not once has a woman beaten a man. It's genetics. And so simple. Men are faster and stronger because they are.
These are the worst Olympics in history. They have made a mockery out of Christianity and women. And let me remind you, there's no such thing as a chick with a dick. Keep women's sports female.
This is lunacy. These weirdos are clapping for and encouraging the normalization of dysphoria. She can step in the ring with a male boxer and then get back to us. Let's see if that changes her mind. All the people who are for men and women's sports never played sports before. A biological black female who screams discrimination every breath now agrees with pure outright discrimination against biological females for fair level right to competition in sports. How awkward can things get in The View?
When you're the best in the world, people get obsessed, with what you do. And then comes a genetic, okay? We all different anyway.
People with no knowledge of sports should be ignored when it comes to discussing the advantages males have over females. They have no clue. Best line is our bizarre suggestion. If you don't know anything about our bodies, you don't know how it works. Maybe one day someone will conduct research to learn about female bodies and determine how they work. Until then, we must turn to Mulvaney and her friends for insight.
I think it challenges and threatens the integrity of women's sports to have intersex athletes competing against genetic women.
People born male have higher muscles and bone density, better leverages in the lower body for running. They are better in the upper body for anything requiring power. Men have really good overhead power, while the female body has very little overhead power. The men are more injury resistant and their endurance is better. The proportions of the frames of the male bodies are different, regardless of whether men transition or not. Their bodies are fundamentally better suited for athletics, allowing people born male into women's competitions, particularly when they are directly competing with fully natural women for scholarships and podium spots, is not a reasonable thing for the woman involved. Those spaces are there for them to have a place to compete fairly. We can't take that away from them for the sake of trans players because it's just simply unfair. Fairness is the basis of sport. Why is it okay to sacrifice the third and fourth best female athlete for someone who wasn't even in the top 100 as a man? That woman doesn't get any medals. She fades into obscurity. It's absurd. And this part, it changes everything.
And I've made it official, an official policy of the United States, that there are only two genders, male and female. And we will have no men participating in women's sports, and transgender operations, which became the rage, will occur very rarely.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump has since signed a new rule stopping transgender girls and women from joining women's sports in schools and other educational places. The order, called Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports, is one of many new actions focusing on gender issues in the U.S. In February, Trump signed the order in the White House's East Room saying the war on women's sports is over.
And a historic executive order to ban men from competing in women's sports. It's about time.
The order tells the Department of Justice to make sure transgender girls and women can join female sports teams or use women's locker rooms in schools. If schools don't follow the rule, they could lose federal funding. This decision is based on a new take on Title IX, a U.S. law that protects against sex discrimination in education. Under this rule, sex now means the gender someone was given at birth. It's little wonder why ladies of The View are always against Donald Trump.
Under the Trump administration, we will defend the proud tradition of female athletes, and we will not allow men to beat up, injure, and cheat our women and our girls. From now on, women's sports will be only for women.
Well, it's The View, so are you really surprised with anything they say? Not sure how that show is even still on TV. Do you support transgender males in female sports? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss any updates. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.